Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, because what you're about to hear might just change how you see America's justice system forever. The sun had barely risen over the Rocky Mountains when a convoy rolled to the gates of ADX Florence, the most secure federal prison in the United States. Known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, this fortress was built not just to contain criminals, but to erase them from the world. Concrete walls 30 feet high, steel doors that never open together, and corridors lined with reinforced mesh designed to stop even a whisper from passing through. Inside one of those cells, inmate Marcus Leary, 42, stared at the ceiling as a fluorescent light flickered on. He hadn't seen another human face up close in 7 years. Once a notorious criminal defense attorney turned whistleblower, Leary was now serving a life sentence after exposing corruption that reached deep into the prison industrial system, including ADX Florence itself. But today wasn't like the others. Today, he'd been summoned. The last time an inmate left the cell at dawn, it was because something had gone terribly wrong. 2 guards approached, their boots echoing against the cold corridor. "Leary, on your feet," one barked. The mechanical where the door opening was followed by the sound of restraints snapping into place. Hands cuffed, ankles shackled. He was escorted down the hall, past men who hadn't spoken to anyone in years, locked behind double-sealed glass. He was taken to interview room B, a sterile cube of steel and soundproof glass. Waiting inside was Special Agent Dana Cross, an investigator from the Department of Justice's Internal Affairs Division. Her face was tense, unreadable. "Marcus," she said, sitting opposite him. "You worked on the Florence case before you were arrested. You knew people here. You knew things." Leary's lips curled into a smirk. "You didn't bring me out of solitary for small talk, Agent." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, gruesome, raw. A man, face down in his cell, eyes wide open, blood pooled under his head. Inmate Vincent Hale, dead. Official cause, suicide. But the cameras went dark 2 minutes before it happened. No footage, no witnesses. Leary leaned back, his chains rattling softly. "Let me guess," he said. "You think the cameras failed by accident?" Cross didn't answer. Instead, she showed him another photo, a note found under Hale's mattress. It read only 5 words. "The kitchen holds a truth." Leary's smirk vanished. He looked at her, his voice dropping. "You have no idea what's happening here, do you?" For years, rumors had swirled among inmates about the ADX kitchen, not just the food, but what went through it. Stories of expired supplies, drugs mixed into meals to keep prisoners compliant, and certain trays marked with invisible ink, given to inmates who were never seen again. Agent Cross pressed on. "You represented one of the contractors who supplied that kitchen. I need to know what you found before you were silenced." Leary's eyes flicked to the security camera in the corner. Its red light was blinking, recording. "Turn it off," he whispered. "You don't want this on record." Cross hesitated, then nodded to the guard. The red light faded, and then Leary began to speak. He told her about the ghost shipments, trucks that arrived in the middle of the night, carrying unmarked containers, about the hush money paid to staff who signed off on them, about the prisoners who filed food-related complaints, and then mysteriously transferred within weeks. But before he could finish, the lights flickered. The intercom buzzed with static. A voice crackled through. "Unit lockdown. All personnel, secure positions." Cross's radio went dead. "Is this a drill?" she asked the guard, but he was already pale. "No, ma'am," he said. "This isn't on the schedule." Sirens blared through the walls. A heavy metallic clang echoed from the hallway. One of the cell doors had malfunctioned. Leary tensed. "You don't get it," he said. "This place isn't failing, it's purging." Through the window, Cross saw it. Prisoners pounding on their doors, shouting, lights flashing red through corridors. The security systems weren't going down. They were being overridden. Someone inside the prison was taking control. Leary looked up, his voice trembling for the first time in years. "You've got less than an hour, Agent, before ADX Florence resets itself, and every record, every file, and every inmate connected to that kitchen disappears." Cross stared at him, realization sinking in. Then we better start running. The alarm roared louder. Somewhere in the maze of concrete, a door slammed shut, and then the power went out. The siren screamed to the concrete labyrinth of ADX Florence, echoing like metallic thunder. The emergency lights flickered red, washing the corridors in a pulsing infernal glow. Inside Interview Room B, Special Agent Dana Cross and Marcus Leary stood frozen for a split second. Listening, the hum of electricity was gone. The silence that followed was heavier than the alarms themselves. Then came the voice on the intercom, distorted, calm, unfamiliar. Protocol 7 initiated. Containment in progress. Cross grabbed her radio, static, dead. The guard beside her tried the door, locked from the outside. Leary, still shackled, leaned forward slowly. "You hear that, Agent?" he said, voice low. "Containment. That means someone's cleaning house." She glared at him. "Who's behind this, Marcus? Who has that kind of access?" He chuckled bitterly. "The people who built this place." Before she could press him further, the emergency panel clicked. The door slid open on its own with a sharp hiss. No one was outside. The corridor stretched endlessly, red lights flashing, distant shouts echoing from deep within the complex. Cross motioned for the guard to move, weapon drawn. "We're getting out. Now." As they stepped into the hall, Leary spoke again. "You won't get far without me. Every corridor here looks the same. They built it that way, to break your sense of direction." Cross hesitated, then nodded for the guard to unchain him. "One wrong move," she warned, "and you go down first." The three of them moved through the narrow passageways. Doors sealed behind them with each step, slamming shut automatically as the facility security systems re-engaged. In the distance, something metallic clanged, heavy, deliberate, rhythmic. Leary stopped. "That's the maintenance gate near the kitchen," he said. "Whoever's behind this is down there." Cross frowned. "The kitchen? You mean where Hale said the truth was?" Leary nodded grimly. "That's not just where they cook, Agent. That's where they process everything." As they reached the lower levels, the temperature dropped. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting ghostly blue-white light over the concrete floor. The smell hit first, a mix of disinfectant, rot, and something chemical. Cross covered her nose. "This doesn't smell like any kitchen," she muttered. Leary motioned toward a set of double doors. "That's because it isn't." When they pushed inside, they found a cavernous industrial space. Rows of stainless steel tables, massive refrigerators humming against the walls, and conveyor belts lined with sealed meal trays. But something was wrong. Many of the trays weren't filled with food. They were stacked with clear bags, evidence bags, each labeled with inmate numbers. Inside were items that shouldn't exist. Syringes, documents, and envelopes stuffed with cash. Cross's eyes widened. This is a smuggling operation. Leary shook his head. "No, this is a disposal line." He walked over to a large hatch at the far end of the room, the kind used to dump waste into the incinerator system. This is where they send everything they don't want the world to see. Evidence. Contraband. People. The guard flinched. "People?" Leary looked up. "You think everyone who hung themselves in ADX just vanished?" "No. They were processed. The files are wiped. The cameras fail. Then the body, or what's left, goes through here." Cross felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Who runs it?" Leary hesitated, then answered quietly. "A shadow contract under the Bureau's food supply program. Private sector. They use inmate labor to move the shipments, but the records don't exist. You expose this, Agent, you're not just taking down a prison. You're taking down a system." Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind the doors. Cross motioned for silence. The doors creaked open, and a group of men in black uniforms entered. No visible badges, their movements precise, tactical. They weren't guards. They were cleanup. One of them raised a radio. "Target located. Proceed to secure." Leary whispered, "They're here for me." Cross fired first. A single shot that shattered a fluorescent light. The room erupted in chaos. The guard dove behind a table, returning fire. Leary sprinted toward a service tunnel marked waste management, restricted. Bullets clanged against metal as he vanished into the darkness. Cross followed, heart pounding, gun drawn. They slid through the tunnel, lights flickering overhead. The air grew thick with smoke from somewhere above. The facility was burning. "Marcus," she shouted, "where are you taking us?" He pointed ahead, breath ragged, to the control hub. "If we can get to the system core, I can show you everything. The files, the transfers, the proof." They reached a steel door with a keypad. Leary typed a code from memory. The door slid open, revealing a small operations room filled with flickering monitors. On the screens were live feeds from every block of the prison. Guards down, inmates screaming, corridors in chaos. Cross turned to Leary. "You said this place was purging itself. What does that mean?" He walked up to the main console, typing furiously. "It means by midnight, every record linked to ADX, every document, every camera log, every name gets wiped. And anyone who knows the truth," he looked up, eyes dark, "doesn't make it out." The power surged again. The screens blinked, flashing one last message before going dark. "System reset in 1 hour." Leary turned to her. "We've got 1 hour to get out of this place alive." And from the corridor beyond, heavy footsteps began approaching. The clock on the monitor blinked relentlessly. 59 minutes and 42 seconds. 59 minutes and 41 seconds. Counting down the final hour before the entire ADX Florence system wiped itself clean. Agent Dana Cross stood frozen in the dim control room, the glow of the red emergency lights painting her face in shadows. Behind her, Marcus Leary tapped frantically at the console, trying to override the lockdown. "You said you could stop the purge," she shouted over the low hum of the generators. Leary didn't look up. "I said I could delay it. Maybe the main servers in sublevel C. But getting there means going through central control. Where those black uniformed men came from," Cross muttered. He nodded. "Exactly. They'll be guarding it. And if we don't get there before the system resets, every name tied to this program disappears, including mine, including yours." Cross took a deep breath. "Then we move. Now." They stepped into the corridor, the smell of burnt insulation and gunpowder hanging thick in the air. The sound of distant shouting echoed through the halls. Guards tried to regain control, inmates banging on their cell doors, alarms still wailing in the distance. Every step they took echoed like a drumbeat in the empty, metallic halls. As they descended towards sublevel C, Leary spoke quietly. "You know how this started, right? This place was supposed to be unbreakable. No escapes, no deaths unaccounted for. But the Bureau outsourced control, food, surveillance, maintenance. One contract, one company." Cross glanced back. "Who?" Leary's voice was grim. "Argus Systems. They supplied tech and logistics for prisons all across the U.S. ADX was their prototype. A fully self-regulated correctional complex. No oversight, no paper trail." Cross frowned. "And they used inmates as test subjects." Leary nodded. Prisoners disappeared. Sometimes they'd move them off the books, testing isolation limits, medication compliance. But when the program leaked internally, they started purging anyone who knew. That's what you're walking into. Agent, a cover-up decades deep. They reached the end of the corridor, a reinforced steel door with a biometric lock. Cross pointed her gun. "Can you open it?" Leary placed his hand against the panel. It beeped once, denied access. He grimaced. "Not with my ID. It needs an active clearance code." Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, filling the hall with a cold, mechanical voice. "Unauthorized movement detected. Termination protocol active." The red lights above them shifted to blue. A hiss filled the air. Cross's eyes widened. "Gas!" She yanked her jacket over her face, dragging Leary to a maintenance shaft nearby. "In here." They dove inside, coughing as a thick, chemical vapor filled the corridor. The shaft was narrow, dark, and rusted with age. They crawled downward, the echoes of their movements mixing with the distant sound of boots on steel. When they finally dropped out into a lower chamber, Cross realized where they were. The kitchen sublevel. The same industrial room from the earlier chaos. now dimly lit and filled with smoke. But this time, the conveyor belts weren't running trays. They were carrying sealed black containers, each marked Transfer Site 09. Leary walked over, slicing one open with a metal shard. Inside was a tablet drive, stamped with the Argus Systems logo. "This is it," he whispered. "Backup data. They're moving the files off-site before the wipe completes." Cross's pulse quickened. "Then we take one." They grabbed as many drives as they could, stuffing them into a canvas duffel. But before they could move, the kitchen doors burst open. 3 of the black uniformed men stepped in, rifles raised. Cross fired first, ducking behind a steel counter. Sparks flew as bullets tore through the metal. Leary crawled toward the service tunnel, shouting, "This way!" A shot hit the pipe beside him, sending a burst of steam across the floor. Cross returned fire, hitting one of the men in the leg. The others retreated briefly, regrouping. Leary slid through the tunnel, clutching the duffel. If we can reach the waste chute, it leads outside the perimeter. Cross followed, the tunnel vibrating with the sound of the facility above shaking apart. The purge countdown hit 15 minutes. They emerged in the sub-basement, a cold, dripping chamber beneath the prison. Through the iron grates above, Cross could see the faint glow of the Colorado dawn creeping in. Freedom was just a few feet away. But as they approached the waste chute, Leary stopped. "Wait! There's something you need to know before we get out." Cross frowned. "What?" He looked at her, expression unreadable. "Argus didn't hire me to expose this. They hired me to contain it. My job was to find out how much you knew and make sure it stayed buried." Cross froze. "You're lying." He stepped back slowly, pulling a small device from his pocket. "This triggers a final purge, including the drives we're carrying. The Bureau doesn't leave loose ends, Agent." She raised her gun. "Don't." Leary smiled faintly. "You don't get it. Even if you kill me, they'll just erase you next." Before he could press the button, Cross fired. A single shot to his shoulder. The device clattered to the floor, sparking. The lights flickered violently. The system timer flashed 1 minute. Cross grabbed the duffel and ran, diving into the chute just as the entire sublevel erupted in fire and static. The world went white. Hours later, a search team combed the wreckage. The official report would later claim a containment malfunction, destroyed part of the ADX lower facility. There were no confirmed survivors. But 2 weeks later, an anonymous package arrived at a Denver news station. Inside, a single Argus Systems data drive, sealed in plastic. The footage showed everything: the smuggling, the cover-ups, the experiments. The report aired for 1 night, then vanished from all major networks within hours. And buried deep in a restricted federal database, a new entry appeared. Subject: Dana Cross, status: missing. The screen faded to black. If you think this story ended here, you're wrong, because the next one begins with who really built ADX Florence. Hit subscribe before it disappears too.